I have put together a list of practices, and there are 10 of them that I've come up with that can help increase our self-discipline. And I'd be interested in your thoughts as I kind of go through them. One, I think you've hit on already, is set clear and specific goals. Breaking things into small, actionable steps with deadlines makes them easier to achieve, and that helps us stay motivated. So you touched on that. Touched on another one. Develop good habits through repetition. Making things habits, they become automatic behaviors that we don't have to think about. We don't have to use mental energy to get motivated to do them if they're habits. This is the case for me with like riding my stationary bike and other things. It's a habit. If I don't do it, something's off. And so I think that's an important one. Another one, number 3, is use if-then planning. Plan ahead. When we decide on what we're going to do before a situation arises, we're much more likely to actually follow through. If this thing happens, I will do that, as opposed to just being surprised by it. That'll help us to be disciplined. If they bring out the cheesecake, I will go to the arcade. I will do something else, whatever it may be, right? So having some activity like that planned ahead. Practice delayed gratification. As someone who's gone through medical training, this is something that I did for years, but it helps us to resist immediate temptations in favor of that longer term reward. The 5th thing, practice mindfulness. When we're mindful, we're more aware of our impulses and our emotional state. And that means we have the opportunity to regulate and reduce those high intensity sort of emotions. The 6th thing, strengthen self-discipline through practice. Again, kind of alluded to, like a muscle, when we progressively challenge our self-control, we strengthen it. Number 7, avoid decision fatigue. And I kind of touched on that a little bit earlier with if-then thinking. If this happens, I will do that. We are bombarded with so many decisions every day. And so if the decision comes and I've had 1,000 decisions up to that point, and somebody says, what do you want for dinner? Would you like us to go out to eat, or would you like to think of what to make at home? I'm more likely to just use less energy. Let's just go out to eat.
Right.
Even though that may not be good for me. So we deplete our willpower when if we think about it, like we've got a box of energy for making decisions, and that lasts through the day, and then we renew overnight. If we use all of our energy up to make decisions earlier in the day, we're going to be in trouble later in the day. So having those things where we've got that ahead decreases our decision fatigue and helps us lose our self-discipline. Number 8, use positive reinforcement. Rewarding ourselves for progress can help motivate us and reinforce self-discipline. There was one thing that you were saying earlier that made me think about this, is have a goal, have a target, have the discipline, but if you mess up, don't just throw the baby out with the bathwater. Just get right back on the horse. I'd be interested in your thought on that, and then we can come back to number 9. But
yeah, there's a great historical analogy here that I never experienced personally, but it's prisoners of war. And we came up with a code of conduct, and it said, if you're captured, you'll give your name, rank, and serial number. And of course, in some wars with certain enemies, that was realistic because they weren't going to mistreat. But in Korea, and then of course in Vietnam, American prisoners were treated horribly. And it turned out to be very unrealistic to expect somebody under torture to only give name, rank, and serial number. And so what happened was, with some prisoners, they were broken. Anybody can be broken. And they're forced to do something they had said that they wouldn't do. And what they found was, in many prisoners, that caused a reduction in self-regard. Their self-respect went down because they said, I wasn't what I should have been. I am now a failure. And it made it much more likely that they would continue to cooperate with the enemy in the future. And what they were taught, the best and the strongest, emphasized this: every time you're broken, that doesn't become the new standard. You go the standard back up and make them break you again. Now, it's easy for you and I to have this conversation because we're not being tortured.
Sure.
But I think that's true, and I do it in small ways. If I lose my temper and I act like an idiot with somebody who doesn't deserve it, and I do that more often than I'd like to, that doesn't become the new standard. I literally go, boy, I was a jerk. And I try to go back to where I was and say, I won't do that again. And I think in all the things in life, whether you make a mistake, you drink too much, you do anything, go right back to where that idealized version of you is and try to stick with it.
Yeah. I'm reminded of Louis Zamperini and Unbroken, just the things that he went through and how he was able to get through that. And Susan Hillenbrand's obviously, her book on that was great. But yeah, this idea of don't let it take away that, what you said at the very beginning of when we were talking about the practical components, don't let it steal away from that ideal self, that what you want to be.
Right.
You're aiming for what you want to be. Just because you trip, get back up and keep going. And don't let it keep you down. So
I think you can't let things define you, because most of us have failures in our life. I had a very public failure. My military career ended with a controversial magazine article that came out. And it put me in one of those situations where I have to decide who I am right after that. And the reality is, what I learned and what I try to tell people now is, don't try to relitigate the past. Don't cry about it. You can't do anything about it. You can do something about the future. Yeah. And so if you try to set the standard that what you want to be in the future, just do that every day, then the damage of any failure you have is less than it would otherwise be. And that's the best you can do. And I think it is the healthy approach.
That is so tremendously important and great wisdom, that don't litigate the past. The past is the past. Be who you want to be moving forward. And I think when the people that we're leading or trying to lead see us behave thusly, it only increases, because everybody knows there's nobody listening to this podcast, at least, who's perfect. Okay. And so everybody knows that we all trip up sometimes. It's those people who say, you know what, I screwed up, I own that, but I'm going to be better moving forward. We have so much more respect and willingness to follow somebody like that than somebody who tries to litigate the past, who doesn't let it go, who doesn't admit, yeah, I made a mistake, I screwed up. So I think that's a tremendous aside leadership wisdom that has come out just now in our conversation that I really appreciate. Well, two more. Number 9, and we kind of hit on this: create a support network. Accountability with others increases our motivation to stay committed to our goals. And number 10, monitor your progress. Tracking our progress actually helps us to stay mindful of our goals and increases our motivation to keep going. So that wraps up the 10. Actually, you added a couple of extras. So we got 12 good practices of how we can improve our self-discipline. Obviously, you've got a book that's going to be forthcoming soon on this very topic, and I look forward to reading that.
You talk about mindfulness, and I know mindfulness has many interpretations, but I would argue one of the great disciplines is just thinking. We don't think enough. We accept too many things that are given to us as maybe your parents told them, or religious, or school, or nowadays social media, or a pundit who just says, this is this, and people sort of grab it and they repeat it and they go forth with that. I think we owe it to ourselves to think about things that matter. Now, as you say, don't spend a lot of time thinking about things that don't matter. But those things that matter, decide what you actually think, what you believe. And that will give you guideposts that wouldn't otherwise exist.